Mr Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. You all touched on the point about perception of fairness and trust. I think that's an important point, particularly given the service is designed to actually bring people together and it's in the best interest of children. I get, as many of us around the table would get, casework on both sides of the equation here, where receiving parents perhaps aren't getting the money and support they need, and paying parents, again, they feel they're being aggrieved because they're paying perhaps more or being treated unfairly as a result of the system. Certainly, I mean, I come from a single-parent family. My mum brought up 3 children on her own. We didn't have any recourse to the child maintenance service or whatever it was back then. But essentially, I accept that, a robust system is there for the interest of the children. And unfortunately, at the minute, the perception, at least amongst myself and many MPs, that it's not working. I just wanted to take, maybe Sam, start with you. Your view on the balance of fairness and how that's gone out of kilter and what can do to maybe put it back in kilter.
I mean, I think we need to look at how other countries do it. I think this is a fraught area, and the danger is that the way it's set up, it becomes a zero-sum game. More money for the paying parent is less money for the child, vice versa. But I think the fundamental problem is the lack of transparency, and I'm sure Abigail and Sarah can talk about the transparency issues for receiving parents. But if you are a parent who is a non-resident parent trying to be involved in the child's life, there is no recognition for the cost of contact. If you want to stay involved, there are travel costs, there's accommodation costs, there's often contact centre costs. All these things are not taken into account properly within the calculation. You also have a situation where there is no recognition of the financial circumstances of the receiving parent. And the UK is pretty much an outlier on this. There are very, very few countries which just have this formula, which purely looks at the income of the paying parent. The CMS will defend it that it's simple and it's the best way to get money to the children. I mean, I disagree. Other countries manage to find formulas which are open and transparent. So, for example, when you go to court, whether it's over contact or finances, the court puts the child first. They look at what are the child's needs and how can both parents provide that, whether it's looking after the child or whether it's finances. When you get to CMS, you have this binary formula which purely looks at one person's income. So that immediately creates this sense of unfairness. And particularly on the lower pay, it does produce unaffordable calculations. There's not just me saying this. So many parliamentary reviews have said exactly the same thing, which then underlies the problem of arrears. But when you're then in that situation where you're trying to do the right thing, and I'm not talking about the hardened non-payers, that's a different sector. We see the people who want to be involved in their child's life and want to make a contribution to their child's life and are struggling to do so. When you've got all these other costs which aren't being taken care of, and when, if you miss a payment, fairly draconian state-sponsored measures are put in place, when at the same time you're trying to have contact with your child, and this is where this sense of unfairness and injustice comes in, and there is minimal consequences if the other parent, for no good reason, breaches a contact order. You compare the level of measures and the way that the state comes down on fairly single missed payments, and then when you're not seeing your child or struggling to see your child and got all the costs of if you are seeing your child, that's where that sense of unfairness comes in. And I think, your question was, how do we improve the system? I'm arguing for fundamental reform. We need to look at how other countries do it. Look at a system where there's open transparency about your situation. You might not agree with the outcome, but at least you can buy into it. We don't have a system which is transparent either for the paying parent or the receiving parent. You can build that into the existing system. I think there does need to be recognition of both parents' income to create that sense of fairness. And we also have this perverse incentive baked into the current system where if you're the receiving parent, you can receive more maintenance if you reduce the contact of the other parent. And that in itself just creates conflict, because whenever there's a reduction in contact, there's going to be suspicion. Why is that being done? So having that perverse incentive within the system, and there are measures you can do around that in order to alleviate that. But I think the fundamental problem of this system then fuels all these other problems around arrears and then problems with enforcement.
Thank you. If I turn to Abigail, on that same question, but I think you gave some statistics about the paying parent 24% weren't paying the amount required. That goes to, I guess, when you said that, in my mind, it triggered a question, well, is the amount that's set the correct amount? If it's perhaps too high and the paying parent can't afford it because the formula is wrong, then arguably that will impact the percentage of what is actually paid. I'll just get your view on that as well.
That could be a factor within it for it to be quite that high, and then the higher, I'm speculating here, and I'm not sure if speculating is ever helpful, but I would suggest that's more the case where something is paid rather than nothing at all. I think it is worth flagging up that we've got 75% of payments are made at less than 90%. You know, this money simply isn't getting through. Can I turn to the some of the broader issues that we hear from parents as well in terms of the fairness? In contrast to what Sam was saying, we hear a lot from receiving parents about a real reluctance from the CMS to use any of the enforcement tools that they have available to us. So when we surveyed parents, it was 6 in 10 parents with care told us that they felt that the service was really reluctant to use any of the powers that they had available. They also report extremely long waiting times for anything to be done after after payments are missed, after investigations are completed. And during this time, of course, arrears are accumulating, and accumulated arrears are not good for anyone. You know, the stacked up debt is very bad for the paying parent, and not receiving the money, of course, has that impact on the quality of life of the child in question. I think having to, as I said before, repeatedly chase the CMS and follow up on what's happening, this really adds to the difficulties in these areas, and parents on both sides talk about quite how difficult this is. I think in terms of fairness, we also hear from receiving parents how they feel the CMS puts the burden of proof on challenging things like the reported level of income of the paying parent on them rather than on the system to investigate. So we know at the moment that it's only earned income that is taken into account in the initial calculation. So any income from assets such as rental properties or dividends or things like that isn't taken into account to begin with. And when parents flag up that they think there is a discrepancy between what's been reported and the life that they know that their ex-partner is living, the CMS is very reluctant to investigate, and they frequently ask receiving parents, can you provide proof of perhaps your ex-partner's payslip, things like this, which simply aren't appropriate for them to be providing. We've heard in really extreme cases where the CMS has asked them to prove proof of a rental property to go and get photographic evidence, and this was a case where there had been domestic abuse, there was a non-molestation order. The way in which the CMS seems to be putting the burden on the receiving parent to provide this proof rather than carrying out investigations themselves feels unfair.
Thank you for that context. Just conscious of time, so I'll hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very much
much
for your contributions.